They'd barely slept since the last sighting. Sleep was a cruel joke out here, chased away by the constant memory of those hollow eyes and that twisted grin. The creature wasn't just a monster. It was a predator, hunting in the dense labyrinth of roots and murky water. They'd convinced Gus, the old fisherman, to lend them a flat-bottomed skiff equipped with a small outboard motor. It was the only way to push deeper into the mangrove maze without getting swallowed whole by mud or snapping roots. As the motor sputtered and coughed to life, Jake gripped the worn wood of the boat's bench, the faint spray of brackish water misting his face. Ryan sat beside him, scanning the dark water and shadowy mangrove trunks. "Where do we start?" Jake asked. "Follow the trail," Ryan said. "The drag marks, the bloody bits we found, they have to be close." The boat slipped silently into a narrow channel, the water eerily still. Overhead, the tangled canopy cut off most of the fading daylight, leaving the swamp in a perpetual gloom. They passed signs of the creatures passing, snapped branches, scuffed mud banks, and the faint, sickly sweet smell that clawed at their throats. Then, just as the sun disappeared behind thick clouds, Ryan spotted something. "Look there," he whispered, pointing. Beneath the water's surface, a tangle of pale limbs twitched. It was the remains of a victim, partially submerged and entangled in the roots, skin pulled taut, face frozen in a silent scream. Jake swallowed hard, turning away. "Jesus." Ryan's voice was low. "It's been feeding here." They scanned the water, looking for any sign of the creature. Suddenly, a movement caught Jake's eye. Something slipped beneath the water's mirror-like surface, a humanoid shape with long arms trailing behind it, hair like kelp drifting in the current. The creature burst out again, breaking the surface with a wet, ragged gasp, its chest rising and falling in frantic, painful heaves. It looked at them, those eyes filled with raw hunger and madness. For a moment, the swamp was silent except for the rasping sound of its breath. Then it let out a wet, guttural screech and vanished beneath the water. Jake and Ryan knew then the truth. The creature was a twisted fusion of man and monster, a killer mutated by unknown horrors of the swamp, struggling to survive, but always hungry, always deadly. And it was coming for them. Chapter 7, The Swamp's Grip. The Keys had never felt so suffocating. Even the night air was thick enough to drown in, humid and heavy with the scent of rot and salt. Jake and Ryan's clothes clung to their skin, soaked through with sweat and swamp water. Every step through the mangroves felt like wading through sludge, the roots grasping at their boots like the swamp itself was trying to drag them under. They'd learned one brutal fact. The creature couldn't stay underwater forever. It had to come up for air, gasping, wheezing, desperate. That vulnerability was their only hope. They camped near the edge of a dark lagoon, the water black and still except for the occasional ripple. Jake set traps fashioned from fishing line and hooks, makeshift snares designed to catch anything moving through the shallows. Ryan kept watch, eyes sharp for the slightest movement. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the distant calls of night birds and the drip of water from the leaves. Then a splash. The creature was back. It moved slowly, deliberately, emerging from the water with that sickly pale skin glistening in the moonlight. Its chest heaved violently as it gasped for air, the raw sound echoing through the trees like a curse. Jake tensed, ready to spring the trap. But the creature's eyes met his, wild, furious, alive with a twisted intelligence. It reached out with webbed fingers, claws clicking softly against the roots. And then, just as suddenly, it dove back beneath the surface, leaving nothing but a trail of bubbles and a lingering sense of dread. The brothers knew the swamp had claimed them now, not just as witnesses, but as prey. The hunt was only beginning. Chapter 8, Descent into Madness. The Keys were turning into a fever dream. Every second breath Jake took was heavy with the stench of rot and salt. Every shadow seemed to pulse with something alive and watching. The humid air stuck to his skin like a second layer, the heat twisting his thoughts and chipping away at his resolve. Ryan was worse. His eyes were bloodshot, wild, flickering constantly between fear and anger. They'd been chasing the creature for days, following its twisted trail deeper into the swamp's heart, where the sunlight barely pierced the thick canopy and the air was thick with decay. They'd started finding more than just tracks and torn clothes. Bits of flesh, half-eaten and strewn among the mangrove roots. Hollowed skulls peering up from the mud, their eye sockets empty but accusing. And worst of all, signs of the creature's pattern. Strange marks carved into the bark of trees, symbols Jake couldn't begin to understand, but that sent a cold shiver down his spine. One night, Ryan's hands trembled as he showed Jake a scrap of paper he'd found buried in the mud, stained with something dark and sticky. "Look," he said. The writing was jagged and barely legible, but it spelled out a name, Marion. Jake's throat tightened. "You think it's one of its victims?" Ryan nodded slowly. "Or maybe something more. Maybe it was human once, and it's still trying to remember." The creature wasn't just hunting. It was marking, claiming, turning the swamp into its domain. Feeding on the living and the dead, mutating, losing itself in madness. That night, as they camped near a stagnant pool, Jake couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Every splash, every rustle in the mangroves made his heart pound harder. Then a whisper, soft and wet, drifted through the humid air, barely audible but unmistakable. "Get out." It wasn't the wind. It was the swamp speaking. Chapter 9, Final Breath. The swamp held its breath. The humid night wrapped around Jake and Ryan like a suffocating shroud. Every insect's chirp a jagged shard in the thick darkness. Their bodies were raw, scraped from branches and stung by countless bites. Their minds frayed from days of endless fear and exhaustion. They had tracked the creature to the heart of the mangroves, a place where water churned black and thick, where twisted roots clawed like grasping hands, and the smell of death was so thick it tasted sour on the tongue. Jake gripped the makeshift spear tighter, the metal tip dulled, but still deadly. Ryan carried a heavy lantern that cast flickering shadows across the swamp's rotting carcasses and tangled branches. Both brothers knew this was it, the final confrontation. A low, wet sound rose from the water, a rasping breath that seemed to echo from the swamp's depths. The creature emerged, slow and terrible. Its skin hung in patches, mottled with algae and sores, its eyes blazing with a savage intelligence. It was less human now, a warped thing of hunger and rage, but still the same twisted silhouette they had glimpsed beneath the water surface. Jake stepped forward, spear raised. The creature lunged, its webbed hands clawing at the air, but the brothers were ready. Ryan swung the lantern, smashing it against a mangrove root to shatter the glass, then flung the shards like a trap. The creature roared, a sound that ripped through the night, but it was weakened, gasping, desperate for air. Jake thrust the spear deep into the creature's chest, the point sinking through ragged flesh and cracking ribs. The monster gurgled, eyes wild with pain and fury, then staggered back into the water. Ryan grabbed Jake's arm. "Finish it." Jake hesitated, then plunged the spear again, piercing the creature's heart. It collapsed beneath the water with a final, shuddering breath. The swamp went silent. The humid air lightened, the heavy stench fading into something less oppressive. The brothers stood, soaked and trembling, the weight of the hunt lifting. They had survived, but the Keys would never forget the monster that haunted their waters. The twisted creature born from mutation and madness, a living nightmare that breathed only just beneath the surface.